Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 137, Kentimus, which is in fact a reference to the, so far, last role that Jeffrey Combs has had in Star Trek as the evil computer Agamus in Star Trek Lower Decks, which I really like that character. I think it's a fun character. He might fall in love with an exocomp named Peanut Hamper at some point. Spoilers. But yeah, it's a good time. We have one thing to read. Rosina, Anthropocene Catastrophe Killer, who's been a member for 8 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, I hope you were drinking the correct beverage. Bent, can you show Rosina the Anthropocene Catastrophe Killer if you have... Okay, that's a glass.
That's a glass with ice.
Right.
And I'm going to add this to it.
Oh my goodness, we're not sponsored.
Blast.
We're not sponsored.
Not yet, but we could be.
Someday. Pepsi, let me know. Totally pay me. Drink Baja Blast. DM hasn't changed his username in a while. Wing says, give him time, Dapper Dinosaur. There's a Jeffrey Combs in every species. Yeah, it's basically true. Jeffrey Combs, there's an Andorian Jeffrey Combs, there's an unnamed species Jeffrey Combs, there's a Vorta Jeffrey Combs, there's a Ferengi Jeffrey Combs. You know? There's a lot of Jeffrey Combs out there, which is good.
But not enough.
Not enough. No, we need more. But anyway, we're not really here to talk about Jeffrey Combs, as much more fun as that might be compared to who we are here to talk about. Because, as far as I know, Jeffrey Combs has never been convicted of, say, spousal abuse. So, you know.
Yeah.
Or admitted on camera proudly to child abuse. Which, you know, not things that we can say about Kent here. Or who, allegedly enabled a child predator on his land to predate upon a child. Again, not something we can say about Kent here. Because we are, in fact, here to talk about Kent. But while we do that, we do have a bit of a drinking game. We're going to go over the rules before we actually get into it. But first, Bent, what are you wearing?
Oh, I'm wearing this lovely pink tutu.
Okay.
Isn't it wonderful?
It is wonderful. And so I feel like I was wearing a pink tutu and a human suit last week.
Yeah.
And now you're wearing a tutu. Is there a way that people could get you to wear a tutu on the next Kent with Ben?
There is. There's a donation incentive for a pink tutu.
There you go.
If enough money is donated during the stream, I'll wear a pink tutu again next Kent with Bent.
All right. Well, now that we know that, let's talk about the rules. So, first of all, we drink whenever Kent Hovind says something that's so dumb that it hurts our brains. Now, I'm somewhat inured to Kent Hovind's nonsense, so I call this drink trigger perhaps less often than I should. But, you know, that's the way it is. We'll also drink if Kent Hovind gets something factually correct, that he's not just quoting from someone else. If he actually has the correct thought in his brain, it goes down to his vocal apparatus and he says out loud the correct thing, take a drink. If it's just him reading off of a slide or from a book, doesn't count. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land, or tells a story that didn't happen. For instance, if he tells a story about how, his daughter managed to completely change the entire life of a museum docent by not being able to understand how geology works, yeah, we'll take a drink for that. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. Now, it's a bit of a judgment call, right? But if it seems like something that should go on r/that happened, probably going to take a drink for it. Yeah. We will also take a drink anytime Kent mentions that particular German political party that's symbols are basically illegal to display in Germany outside of museums or textbooks. Yep, we're going to take a drink if he mentions that. We will also take a drink if Kent Hovind confuses what we know about any wider taxon with what we can tell just from the specimen of Lucy. We call that an ad hominid. We only get one of those per strain. There's also the Trojan source, where if Kent Hovind brings in a source that he's using for some claim, and then we check that source, and the source not only fails to support his contention, but actively contradicts it, that's a Trojan source. We take a drink for that. We will also take a drink if either Bent or I can successfully predict what Kent Hovind is going to say coming up next. Also, there's a chance that you might hear Godzilla or Mothra come by. We'll take a drink if they do. There's also a chance that they might not come by. So, But also, if any of you send a super chat or a membership milestone chat that contains one of the kaiju emojis, take a drink for that too. Similarly, anyone who super chats or membership milestone chats anything to the effect that Answers in Genesis or AIG, bag of dicks. Take a drink for that too. Also take a drink for each gifted membership. So those three right there was some great opportunities to not only make the drink counter go up, but also, to get bent into a tutu again. So with that being said, though, we are gonna launch back into some more Kent Hovind.
Yay.
So, Bent, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
From the burglars. Now, Jan, your dog is a little more protection, right? Yeah. What's that dog weigh now?
Oh, in case anyone doesn't remember, what Kent is doing right now is just talking about how much he dislikes chihuahuas for reasons that are never been clear to me. Basically, it seems to be that Kent finds no value in companionship, and therefore a dog that is primarily there for companionship doesn't make sense to him. Which I do want to point out that is kind of the mindset of like a sociopath. I'm not a medical professional. I can't diagnose with Kent with anything. However, what I can say is that he displays personality traits that seem like they're consistent with things like sociopathy and malignant narcissism. Again, I'm not a doctor. It just seems that way. Sort of like if I saw, a big bone sticking out of his upper thigh, from a big, wound, I might say, well, I'm not a doctor, but you seem to have a compound fracture of the femur.
Right.
But technically, I'm not allowed to diagnose that. So,
Exactly.
Also, for $2, let's see. Rail Gatubello. Is it Ray? Oh, Ray El Gatubello. I'm going to go with that. Ray El Gatubello, for $2, with their first super chat, says, Suseki de Kote wa Chinpo no Kabondes. Oh, I only realized at the very end that we were going Japanese. Suseki de Kote wa Chinpo Kabondes. I'm gonna go ahead and guess that that's an AIG as a bag of dicks, because you might be surprised to learn I know almost no Japanese.
More than I know.
Well, just learn some Japanese, Bent.
That is very refreshing.
It is. It's like you just got hit by a blast of Baja. I don't know what that would mean.
80 pounds, German Shepherd. Yeah.
Oh, and Rosina Anthropocene Catastrophe Killer for $4.99 says, we need a drink trigger and or a bingo space for every time Kent disparages dogs. Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe we should. Technically, I'm not in charge of the bingo, though, so I am not actually the one to petition for that one.
Now that, I can see a use for that, but a Chihuahua, I don't see any use for a Chihuahua. Somebody goes to break into the house, yep, whap, kick it clear into the next county, I'm
going to point out that basically makes a Chihuahua an alarm system. Like, I am never not alerted when someone comes to the door, because there's a Chihuahua here. I know every single time. Now, granted, the Chihuahua might not be able to physically stop someone from attacking me, but, maybe that's enough warning for me to run away, or grab a weapon, or do something. Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra for $5 says, to be fair, at least 3 women have found little value in Kent's companionship. Oof. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Very true. Goodness. Kent has actually made me feel bad for an anti-vaxxer, because his wife number 2 is a ridiculous virulent anti-vaxxer. And it takes a lot for me to feel bad for an anti-vaxxer, because basically they're misanthropic pieces of crap. Overall, still though, doesn't mean they deserve what Kent would give one of them as a spouse. Asta Ordained to Seeing Ryu for $4.99 says, I personally said that bigotry towards Chihuahuas should count as casual bigotry. I mean, it's certainly not as bad as casual bigotry towards groups of humans, but I mean, I would say that it does count. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather that Kent, have a random weird bigotry towards Chihuahuas than say a bigotry towards various racial groups. Like, I don't know if you saw it, but there was that time that he had a Native American woman. I think she was from the Navajo Nation. That also might just be my bias in that it's like not that far from here, and I've been in it many times. But anyway, but yeah, when he got her on camera to do a quick little interview from someone staying there for a few weeks, his first question was how many people she'd scalped.
Yikes.
Yep. Yeah, and you could tell she was extremely uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
Yeah, so that's worse than the Chihuahua thing. That's worse because you're not going to hurt a Chihuahua's feelings by saying I don't like you. You're useless. Pretty sure that woman, she was injured by
that. Your dog, I would not try to kick into the next county. I would turn around and run. But dogs have only produced dogs. People that raise dogs will tell you. I had a lady tell me a couple months ago. She said, Mr. Oven, my family and my parents and grandparents, we've been involved in raising dogs for, 60 years or whatever it was. She said, I sincerely believe that we could start with 50 generic mutts from the dog pound. You supply me 50 mutts. Go pick out the mongrel, any mongrel you want. We, with selective breeding, we will redevelop every breed of dog in the world today.
So it's not impossible, but it would require that you get certain specific mutations if they weren't already in the pool of mutts that you got, right? Because one of the things about dogs is they have alleles now in certain breeds that didn't exist earlier in the history of dogs. So if you need to get that particular trait, you might just not have the allele for it. And if you don't, you might not get the mutation, right? An example that's pretty basic for dogs, but it's an interesting one that I think of, is black fur, right? All black fur. Now, you see wolves with all black fur, right? So you might think, well, maybe that's just an ancestral trait in the wolf population. But it's not. We actually have the DNA of wolves from before dogs, and there's no evidence of any of them ever having had the allele for all black fur. Whereas the wolves that do also show other evidence, genetically, of having dogs in their ancestry. So it seems like that's actually a mutation that occurred in dogs and then spread back into the wolf population. So we know that certain aspects of dog breeding requires that you have mutations, right? We also know this about cats, right? Like, the Sphinx cat, weird hairless guys that kind of look like gremlins. We actually know that was a specific mutation that happened in a particular kitten in, I believe, the 1970s. Like, we know the day it was born, the cat that is the origination of this hairless condition in modern Sphinx cats. So you can't just get all modern breeds by simply having some set of the dog genetic diversity without new mutations. Of course, mutations that actually produce new traits that are then useful to the population is something Kent tends to think just doesn't happen. Which, in case you're wondering, the environment that the population of dogs lives in is the domesticated environment, right? Like, if you have a dog, your house and your care for that dog is its environment. If you're a dog breeder, then you are the one who's doing the selection on them. Savage, pre-Yiddish Cobra. Roasting an Anthropocene Catastrophe Killer for $2 says, ever seen two wolves give birth to a dog, Kent? Yeah, that's another thing, right? Kent believes that dogs and wolves share a common ancestor. But I don't think he would think that at some point there was some wolf and then out popped like a dachshund. Like, I don't think that's his idea. For $5, Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra says, AIG is a bag of organisms endemic to the brains of anti-medicine presidential candidates. Jeez. Getting that RFK Jr. swipe right in there. I'll take a drink for that. Yeah, I love that. He's like, oh yeah, I've got a cyst in my brain from a worm, and I had mercury poisoning, but I'm okay. It's like, dude, brain damage like that doesn't just get better. That's a permanent problem for you now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can make sure it doesn't get worse, but like that's not going away. And it's like, yeah, but vaccines are going to cause autism. It's like, oh my goodness, dude. Well, at least now I understand why you are the way you are, because you have had massive like brain damage. And I'm not making that as like a joke. Like, that's literally what he's admitted to, is things that have damaged his brain. Well, I guess I know why you're saying some of the stuff that you are. Heather Cursorial Angiosperms, Coon, for $5 says, fun fact, white governments used to pay bounties for Native Americans' scalps. True. Yep, Native Americans learned scalping from white folks. Yep, basically. Or at least, it is more likely that they got that idea from European colonizers than the other way around. It's not impossible that it could have been something that was happening, because, I mean, it's a pretty basic way to show that you killed, right? So I can't say for certain that that's the origin of all use of scalping in the Americas. However, it certainly is only really well recorded in places where the Europeans were doing it first. So, yeah. It's the evidence weighs heavily in favor of most Native Americans who were scalping getting the idea from Europeans.
In less than 100 years.
Star Song says, contagious venereal dog cancer, technically a non-dog coming from a dog? Well, phylogenetically, though, it's still a dog. That's the thing, right? Because phylogenetically, it's still a member of all of the previous clades that it was in, right? And this Star Song is talking about basically transmissible venereal cancer in canines, which is a thing that happens. There's a venereal cancer in dogs that is transmissible, which is crazy. Because basically, it's a single-cell parasitic dog. Is essentially what that is. And yet, that's a thing. Goopdo3, who's been a member for 22 months, says, RFK Jr., she turned me into a newt. I got better. Monty Python.
We could get a Great Dane and a Chihuahua and a St. Bernard and an Airedale and everything in between from 50 generic mutts in 100 years. Most breeds of dogs, if you stop and think about it, they were done by man for some particular reason.
Wow. Technically true, Kent, but extremely obvious. Thanks. You think Kent knows that one of those reasons is companionship? People are less lonely when there's a dog around?
You would hope he would know that's a thing, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't know for sure if he knows that.
Somebody in Europe or England or something wanted to hunt weasels or groundhogs that go down in the hole in the ground.
If he says dachshund, I'm going to be impressed.
So they kept taking the puppies out of the litter that had the shortest legs.
That's where it's going.
Pretty soon they developed a dachshund.
Wow. All right. Hey, Kent, good job. Yeah. I honestly didn't think that he really knew the purpose for which dachshunds were bred. Because they do seem like a wildly impractical dog. But then you realize, no, they chase things down burrows. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, you're not going to get, Greyhound to go down a weasel burrow. That's not going to happen.
Half a dog high, dog and a half long. He can run down the hole after,
Oh, that was
whatever they're after.
Take a drink for that.
Dogs have different characteristics. Those character traits.
So Rosana Anthropocene Catastrophe Killer says, were Chihuahuas bred as food? I've not read anything to indicate that they were bred as food. I mean, for one thing, if you're going to breed things for food, usually you try to get them big and not small. Like, there's a reason that domesticated turkeys are so gigantic that they can't actually breed anymore without humans to artificially inseminate them. And why, beef cattle breeds tend to just have gigantic muscles all over the place. It's because, you want more meat. So it seems like Chihuahuas were bred primarily for companionship, and also maybe as, a little heat source, because, it's an easy to move around thing that's hot. You can just put it someplace. Oh, hey, you need to keep this, get some heat on your neck because you're sore. Well, put a Chihuahua there. Just, there you go. Get a warm little Chihuahua. But yeah, Chihuahuas, one of the problems with New World dogs is that we don't have great records on who bred them or why. And also, it's not clear to the degree to which New World dogs were replaced by Old World dogs after European contact. So, yeah, it's a whole mess of, like, hard-to-trace stuff when it comes to New World dog breeds. And it does look like, the last I heard on like genetic evidence was that there was very little, if any, actual New World native dog DNA in any modern New World breed. Even ones that seem to have been developed by, indigenous people in the Americas. So, it's a whole mess, what I'm saying, when it comes to why breeds like the Chihuahua were bred.
We're already in the original gene code. You just select which one you want.
No, can't. That's... Oh my goodness, I'm going to take a drink. We know for a fact that's not how it works, right? Because we know of breeds that have unique alleles that do not occur in the wider population. And we know of instances in historical times recorded of new mutations that are selected for by breeders. You cannot simply get all the breeds of dogs today by whittling down wolf genetics. Similarly, you can't get them all by just whittling down a subset of dog genetics. That's impossible. New alleles must be created. Mutation is a requirement. Basically, Kent is trying to do the created heterozygosity thing, right? Where the vast majority of all genetic variation is original, and then variations that you get on that genetic code are all from increases in homozygosity, moving away from genetic diversity, right? But we know that that's not how it works because we know of historical examples as well as prehistoric examples of new mutations spreading into domesticated populations and being selected for. So, no, Kent.
Steve is, what, 6'2"? Becky, 5'7"? When you guys have kids, they're going to be real tall. Eric, you were with me.
I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but they'll probably be taller than their mom. Yep.
With the preacher in South Florida who taught us to shoot the rubber band. Yeah. He was 6'8". His wife was 6'3". Remember the two daughters? The 13-year-old was already 6'3", daughter. The 15-year-old was 6'5".
Yeah. So there's a few things. One is height in humans is not entirely based on genetics. There's a lot of other factors that go into the height of a human. And so it's actually not that unusual for a bunch of kids to be taller than either of their parents. It can be affected by things like nutrition. Now, there are also genetic things, right? For instance, if you go into like the middle of the jungle where like the average human height is, like around like the short end of 5 feet, and you make sure that their kids get the best nutrition you could possibly get, they're still probably not going to make it to like 7 feet tall, right? Probably not. So, yeah, there's a genetic determinative there, but I don't even know where he's going with this.
Both of them still growing like mad. This is in Orlando, I think, or something like that. Traits are inherited. My wife is 5'0". I'm 6'1". If I had married somebody taller, my kids would probably be taller. Sorry about that, boys. She's the one I picked, and you get to pick yours too. It was your problem how tall you came out. You can live with that. My brothers are 6'.
I feel like Eric is actually really tall, isn't he? I know Kent is pretty tall.
I think so, but I don't know.
Okay. Whatever. I guess it doesn't really matter.
3, and they both married taller women, and they're...
Oh no, Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain, your membership expired. Well, it's always possible to get one back if people are generous. And of course, there's a join button right below this video where you can put in like $1.99 a month.
Kids are much taller. It's just, but they're still human.
Yes, Kent, they'll never not be human because that's how evolution works, right? Evolution is like a Word document where you're not allowed to use the delete key, right? You can never delete previous entries. You always can only add new entries. The only option you have is adding new characters into your text file. 23 says, I mean, she's not the one he picked. Yeah, that's true. She's one of the ones he picked, although I don't think he's having kids with any of the other ones. Eris just gifted 5 Dapper Dinos for memberships. They went to Clear Toadstool, Not a Summer Child, a Madman, Super Critical Snake, and Liebenswertig Jussel. And then Joshua Geese also gifted 5 memberships. But first, I'm going to read from Rosina Anthropocene Catastrophe Keller for $4.99. Kent wants to breed 7 feet humans. He obviously has a fetish. Okay, and then 5 from Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra. So let's see. That is Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain. There you go. You got it. Toblixon, Amber Rum and Dino Nuggies, Theros Rex, and Aunt Jer. And then additionally, Mike Brooks, Grant Hellman, Mabbity Babbity, Mr. Anderson, and Midnight Sand. Oh, hey, Mr. Anderson's here. Mr. Anderson has been making the rounds on some of the Young Earth Creationist debate circuits. And he's got an interesting channel about basically debate tactics and how to do debates. So here's what we're going to do. Mr. Anderson, you have been given the privilege to post links that you can post a link to your channel.
Nice.
In the meantime, Bent is going to tell you all about the plot of the encounter at Farpoint while I take 15 drinks. Go ahead, Bent.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take 15 drinks alongside you.
3.
All right, so what happened was they put a bunch of Starfleet members on this new ship called the Enterprise D. And then they went to a planet, and then there was some commotion, and it turns out like the city was really an alien, and it flew away happily ever after.
What was the name of the species that were running the city?
It's a good question. 1, 2.
It was the Bendy.
I don't know, maybe.
And their head guy was Groppler Zorn. So
I think they traveled at warp speed, and there was a saucer separation.
One of the only saucer separations that ever occurred.
Dogs
I don't
produce
know how many
dogs.
drinks I've had,
That's all.
so I'm just going to keep going for a while until I think I'm done.
All you're ever going to get. So why would anybody think that after observing dogs producing dogs for several thousand years of human history, what would make anybody conclude that sometime long ago and far away, dogs came from something that was non-dog?
Because you don't understand how this works, right? It's a branching hierarchy, right? So new branches erupt out of old trunks, which means that the old trunk is still there. So dogs, right, canines, could speciate, right? Like, let's say we do the old classic Mars colonization, except this time we focus on dogs, right? If humans colonize Mars, but then something happens such that Mars and Earth could no longer send people or anything else back and forth, right? And somehow the colonists on Mars managed to get some dogs there. Those dogs would start to evolve separately from the Earth dogs. And eventually, they might be incompatible with Earth dogs, even genetically, right? Forming 2 different species. You got your tall, lanky Mars dogs that, I don't know, probably jump places because the gravity is so much lower. Running is hard, but jumping is easy. Maybe they get, like, kangaroo hopping dogs on Mars. I don't know. Why not, right?
Maybe.
Be fun. Kangaroo hopping dogs. They can't breed with those silly Earth dogs that still run on 4 whole legs. Idiots. But they're still both dogs. But they're very, very, very different. And if you saw the hypothetical Martian bunny hopping dog that probably has very reduced forelegs because now they're basically just a thing that's in the way. So basically you have like a bunny hopping T-Rex dog, which I now realize is not that far off from the Kalid dogs from Elden Ring, except they don't bunny hop. Whatever. It's still a dog, but it's clearly not the same thing as it was before, right? It's a new species. Rosina Anthropocene Catastrophe Keller for $1.99 says, geographic isolation is a real thing? Yeah, as it turns out.
Mm.
And Savage Free Yiddish Cobra says, Belta Woofa. Yes, that is what we will call them. Although they're from Mars, not the belt, but you know what? It's close enough. Yeah, it's still going to be a dog. And the thing is, the thing that wasn't a dog that gave rise to monard canids, which is going to be something like, you know, somewhere between Meiosis and Hesperocyon, it was still a carnivoran, and it was still a caniform carnivoran, and it's still a mammal and a vertebrate and all of these things, right? So when Kent says, why do you think that a dog could come from something that wasn't a dog? He's basically just asking, why evolution, though? He just doesn't understand the most basic aspects of evolution. Which, I mean, was pretty obvious if you listened to the debate that I did with him about birds. Yeah, it was very clear. In fact, eventually in that debate, he was just asking me, like, well, okay, so what is evolution? I had to give a very basic rundown of how evolution works at the most basic level.
Because he doesn't know.
No, he doesn't. Anytime anyone pins him down with any actual, like, specific, like, do you actually know what this thing is? It's always a disaster for him. Which is actually one of the reasons I like Mr. Anderson's debates, because Mr. Anderson is a lawyer who, you know, actually does things like, you know, direct and cross-examinations. So he knows how to get people under questioning to give actual direct answers. And he knows how to completely ignore anything that's irrelevant. He's like, nope, we're not talking about that. Here's the question. And yeah, watching Kent squirm under that kind of grilling, it makes me realize what it must have been like when Kent was actually in court, and how horrible that must have been for him, and how much I lack sympathy for that.
What justification would you have for that conclusion? There's no observable evidence for it. There are genetic barriers.
No observable evidence for it. I'm going to take a drink while some amazing transitional species go by. Because I like transitional species. I don't know if you know this, but there's a whole lot of really cool ones out there. But yeah, we'll stop for now. So yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also the genetic evidence. There's, you know, ERVs. There's neutral variation. There's the twin-nested hierarchy of morphology and genetics. It's all over the place. Oh yeah, Caden Slinker. Yeah, I saw that Kenthoven attacked Clint Reptiles, which honestly I was surprised by. Like, I didn't know that Clint Reptiles was doing like evolution content, because I was most familiar with Clint Reptiles for his like X, the Best Pet Y series, which was like, you know, like I don't know, like Chuckwalla's The Best Pet Lizard, Tailless Whip Scorpion, The Best Pet Arachnid, I don't know, in which he would just go through the pros and cons of owning various exotic pets. But yeah, like, it was Kent that made me alerted to the fact that Clint's Reptiles actually had like evolution and general biology content. Oh, hey, cool. And by the way, that was on his Whack and Atheist. Hey, Bent.
Yeah.
You think Clint Reptiles might be a Christian, actually?
I actually don't know.
Do you think it might be?
Maybe.
So yes?
I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, it turns out he is a Christian. He's very open about that.
There you go.
Yeah. So on Whack and Atheist, yet again, Kenthoven went after a Christian, which seems to happen with surprising regularity over there at Whack and Atheist. It's curious.
To keep it from happening, you know, dogs have 78 chromosomes.
Okay.
Adding or losing chromosomes is normally fatal, or certainly harmful.
Okay, but Kent, you think that kinds are usually somewhere around the family kind. But the reason that mules are sterile, normally, is because horses and donkeys have different chromosome numbers. But you think they shared a common ancestor. So your idea requires that chromosome numbers be able to fluctuate within a kind, which means that it's not a barrier for evolution. Chromosome count isn't a problem per se for evolution. I'm just going to take a quick drink for the whole, like, well, differences in chromosome numbers are a barrier for evolution. You know, except when they're not. But it's not just horses. It's also true in pigs, right? The family Suidae has varying numbers of chromosomes. So does the family Pinnipedidae, which is the seals and sea lions and whatnot. Pinnipeds have different chromosome numbers. So I don't know why Kent would say that this is the big barrier. Although I suppose it might be because he knows about ideas with chromosome fusion and chromosome 2 in humans versus 2A and 2B in other apes. So he might be just saying, well, you can't just have varying numbers of chromosomes, because then that might mean that humans could be related to chimpanzees, and we can't have that.
Like with humans. So, doubling...
Humans who have varying chromosome counts are alive and well today, right? Like, there are humans who only have one X chromosome and no Y chromosome. There are humans who have an additional chromosome. It often can cause medical problems, but, like, not immediately fatal. And some people with chromosomal abnormalities manage to reproduce. So, again, not a guarantee that you're sterile. It's just, like, come on, man. Rosina Anthropocene Catastrophe Keller, who is trying to put my hypothetical hatchlings through college, dinosaur college, obviously. You're going to go to dinosaur law school so they can be dinosaur lawyers in dinosaur court? It's going to be great, hypothetically. Says, anyone that doesn't believe in the three-fingered ice canopy is a dirty atheist. Yeah, he has had the idea of, like, maybe there was an ice canopy about 3 fingers thick. Like, oh, okay. How many hands thick is it? We're going to use horse measurements for this?
The chromosome number, we'll get into that later, the polyploidy, doesn't add any new information. Okay.
Well, Kent, I've never heard you define information, but it certainly increases the amount of genetic material in the genome. So I'm going to take a drink and say it kind of does increase the number or the amount of information. Vishanti for $5 says, this fiver is so Bent could have more Baja Blast with a Mothra. There you go, Bent.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Vishanti.
You get those giant strawberries you buy at the store, that it's polyploidy. They've doubled the chromosome number.
Okay, so most crop plants have had instances of polyploidy, like whole genome duplication. But, like, it's not particular to strawberries, and strawberries that are bred for size and appearance aren't particularly polyploid compared to other strawberries. Like, it's not how polyploidy works. You have a whole genome duplication, then suddenly you're just bigger because I guess you have more DNA, so you need to be bigger to fit it all in or something. Like, what would be the logical throughput to whole genome duplication, therefore bigger strawberry? Is it? I
don't know.
Like, the only thing I can think of is he just thinks, like, well, you have twice as much DNA, so you have to be twice as big. Which is not how it works. It's the only thing I can think of.
Know, like, how, like, all the genetic code in a human body, like, I don't know how much it weighs, but I imagine it's not very
little.
At all.
Very minor aspect.
Like fractions of a percent of your total body weight is your genetic code.
Yeah, it's tiny. And his cognitive trifurcation says, he also said changing chromosome count was lethal. Yeah, so apparently it's not if you're a strawberry, but for some reason it is for most other organisms. Oh, look, it's Mothra. Take a drink from Mothra.
Taste horrible, generally. They don't taste near as good as the regular little tiny strawberries. But they say, wow, look at this giant strawberry. This is proof for evolution.
I mean, it's an example of evolution. That's one of the things that always blows my mind about creationists, is that we'll look at something evolving in front of their eyes, and be like, you think that's evidence for evolution? It's like, I mean, only in the sense that this loaf of bread is evidence of baking being a thing, and that it's a thing that's right there. I have it. It's in my hand. It's like the conspiracy theorist is like, what, you think the moon is real? Like, well, I mean, I look at it, and I can see it. I've seen it through a really, really big telescope. And when I say really, really big, I mean like an 11-foot reflector. Like, the kind of thing that's in a professional observatory. So, like, yeah, pretty sure it's real. And it's the same thing with evolution. They'll watch evolution happen in real time with a real organism. I'm like, not evolution. That just means you don't know what evolution is. But also,
it exactly means.
I'm out of my beer, so it's time to pour another beer while Ken Hovind talk. I am drinking some Shock Top Belgian White today. In part because I really like it, and in part because it was like $1 less than most of the other 6-packs. So, you know.
Today. No, you simply double the chromosome number. You haven't added any new information at all. Luther Sunderland was studying evolution.
Also, I want to point out that doubling chromosome count via whole genome duplication does this cool thing where you get 2 full copies of all the genes that you have, which means that if you have mutations in one copy that maybe breaks that or changes it radically, you still have the other copy that's left to produce the original protein, the original products, which means you can evolve whole new proteins very easily if you have a genome duplication. In fact, we know that this is the case in plants like potatoes and grapes, which are related, and their common ancestor actually had a whole genome triplication. So they actually have 3 subgenomes that are structurally nearly identical, and in most cases, a gene on one subgenome produces the same product as another gene at the same locus in the other subgenome, right? So, like, I mean, you pick a protein, doesn't matter which one, right? So, like, the chlorophyll gene over here is going to be the same as the chlorophyll gene over on this other subgenome and a third one. But in many cases, not most, but many, the different subgenomes, actually, the same locus, actually produces different products, but products which are detectably homologous because they evolved from the same ancestral gene in the pre-triplication ancestor. So it's not the case that this is not something that matters to evolution because it's the same information duplicated. It allows you to go on and evolve part of your genome for a new function that your original smaller genome didn't have. Rosina, bigger equals more genes, Keller, for $4.99. Says, drink cold Baja Blast to cool the mind after the stupid hurts too much. Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah,
It does.
It does help. So, I mean, Kent is just flatly wrong, obviously. But, yeah, I'm just going to take a drink for the whole, like, well, that doesn't help evolution at all. It doesn't increase the information, because it very obviously does. Also, that, by the way, the only reason I know about the genome triplication in, like, grapes and potatoes and their common ancestor is because of Answers in Genesis. One of their speakers was like, evolution doesn't have any explanation for why the genomes of grapes and potatoes are so gigantic. And so I'm like, well, I surely don't know the explanation. Let's check. And it turns out, oh, no, we do know the explanation. It's actually been very well studied, and we know exactly what's going on.
But if you ignore that explanation, then there is no explanation.
Yes, true.
And wanted to find out where the evidence is. So he visited major museums around the world, or wrote to major professors who believe in evolution, and asked them, what
gets you to the level of major professor? Is that like being a major general?
Kind of.
Okay. It's like a rank of professor? Like after brigadier professor?
You have to level up a couple of times.
Yeah, so you get to just professor, right? Well, no, professors is the last one, right? First it's brigadier professor, then it's major professor, then it was like, what's after that? I don't know. I don't know my army officer ranks well enough, sorry. I do know that brigadier comes before major general, though. Is it?
I don't know.
Lieutenant? No, it's not lieutenant general, that's not it. Someone help me out.
What evidence do you have? They would write back, or when he talked to them face to face, they would say, well, we don't have any evidence, but somebody else has it.
This is a story that didn't happen. I'm taking a drink. Now, Kent might be reporting a story that he actually heard from this guy, but it's the thing that didn't actually happen. Tussle Ranger says, I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. Yeah, that was great. I love the original from Mass Effect 2, and I also like the full version of the song that was created by, I don't even know who, but it's on YouTube. Feel free after this to go look up I am the very model of a modern scientist Solarian. It's amazing. Yeah. So, but this story didn't happen, right? Because here's the thing. I know multiple professors who teach things that, either involve evolutionary biology directly, or that involve evolutionary biology in like a peripheral way. And all of them can tell you what is great evidence for evolution. In fact, some of them have YouTube channels. Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal and Dr. Joel Duff come to mind. Both of whom are currently professors. Both of whom have channels here on YouTube teaching about evolutionary biology and providing the evidence for evolution, right? Like, if you write to professors about this, now granted, they might be a bit busy to give you a particular, like, private course on evolution, but they can at least point you in the direction of, like, books to read. So, yeah. Crusher the Crocscore says, how did Kent get a degree? Like, how? It's very simple. It's called a diploma mill. There were no requirements or standards for his degree. He just had to give enough money to the diploma mill. And then he set his own coursework, quote-unquote, which meant probably just write a few creationist books. And then, like, we have his dissertation on the channel. It's like a rough draft. An incomplete rough draft for a book that he wanted to write that he never wrote. And apparently, Kent was so incompetent that he couldn't type it out himself. And so he hired a neighbor's, like, teenage daughter to be his transcriptionist. And allegedly paid her some sum of money for that. And the entire time we're reading this dissertation, like, that's in the back of our minds, is like, this poor girl who was paid to type all this nonsense, and, like, how bad we feel for her, because this must have been a terrible experience. So yeah, he didn't get a real degree. That's the real thing, right? He has as much of a degree as I do, as far as a PhD. I actually do have a real bachelor's degree. It's in history. Yeah.
They all think somebody else has the evidence.
I mean, they're right that someone else does have evidence, but they also do.
He contacted Colin Patterson. Colin Patterson is the one of the curators, the directors of the British Museum of Natural History.
I would love to go there someday. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, though. Rosina Bigger equals more DNA, more genes, Keller, for $4.99 says, a diploma mill that requires you to sign a statement of faith? Yeah, basically. One of the only actual hurdles to get into Patriot Bible University is you need a letter of recommendation from a pastor or other similar churchy person. Like, actually, I don't even know if they would allow, like, if you were, like, Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or something, like, if they would allow, like, your priest to sign off. I feel like they're probably pretty sympathetic with the whole, like, KJV, only Protestants are the only real Christians kind of Christianity. So, yeah, I don't know. But you definitely do have to get some kind of clerical letter of recommendation. And also, Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra. Jeez. It's one step above Major Professor. For $2. Says, dissertations usually contain bad poetry, right? Absolutely. Yeah, in case you're wondering. For some reason, in the middle of Kent's dissertation, he just launches into this absurdly bad poem with, like, an AABB rhyme scheme the whole way through. Like, it's the kind of thing that, like, you know, like an 8-year-old writes when they first learned what poetry is, and they first heard the idea that rhyme is sometimes part of English poetry. It's... Tesla Ranger says I should get an honorary degree in Klingon studies. Well, unfortunately, to get an honorary degree, usually you can only get it from a school that offers the real degree. So, what we really need to do is find a way... It is Lieutenant General, apparently. Goodness. Alright, well, there you go. Look, I was in the Navy. Right? We didn't have generals, we had admirals. And technically we had commodores, but it wasn't a rank. So, actually I was just telling Ben the other day that, like, when I was in Singapore at one time, I just hung out with the Commodore. It was like my boss's boss. Or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. But we traded books while we were on deployment, so he knew me. So I was in Singapore, and this limousine rolls up, and a window rolls down, and he's like, hey, he calls out my name, and I'm like, yeah, hey, hey, Commodore, what's up? He's like, what are y'all doing? I'm like, we were thinking about getting lunch. He's like, hop in, I'll treat you to lunch. So, yeah, I had lunch with the Commodore. And then later I returned his book.
I believe it's in London or near there. They have the largest fossil collection in the world. Nobody has more fossils than the British Museum of Natural History.
Okay, I don't know if that's true. Guys, check that out for me. But however, I have to say, I'm looking, and now we have 101 concurrent viewers, but only 50 likes, which means, unfortunately, I like slightly more than half of you, half as well as you deserve. So, or wait, slightly less than half of you? Doesn't matter. You still got Bilbo.
Display rooms and case after case after case of fossils on display that they've mounted and put up for display.
Oh, right, sorry. Could someone double check whether or not the British Museum actually has the largest fossil collection in the world? Because it wouldn't be like, oh my goodness, I never would have guessed. But I also don't know, and I would like to know. Yeah, just make sure you tag me. Yeah, Starsong says a Navy captain is equivalent of an Air Force colonel. I do know that. I just forgot the general ranks, right? I remember, lieutenant, whatnot, captain, all those things.
Colin Patterson, the director of this museum, wrote a book about evolution.
Oh, and Dark Law Dragon, who's been on for 22 months, sends all the kaiju emoji and an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji, so we'll take a drink. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Wrote how he believes in evolution, how this animal changed to this animal. Well, Luther Sunderland read the book, and
Borg Emporia, who's been a member for 11 months, says, watching the stream with my mom, since I am with her for my birthday last Saturday and Mother's Day. Keep it awesome, please. Well, thank you very much, and hello to your mom. Hello, Mom. Well, Borg Emporia's mom. You're not my mom, unless Borg Emporia is secretly one of my siblings. Which is, I suppose, not impossible, but then none of my siblings had a recent birthday, so... Probably not my mom.
noticed he told us about evolution, but he never showed us any examples. He never showed us the fossil of the missing link. And there'd have to be zillions of these. He said, Mr. Patterson, where are the missing links? I read your book. Why didn't you show us a picture of one? Colin Patterson wrote back a very interesting confession, and he has since been chided for it many times, I'm sure.
That's not true, but we'll let him cook for a little bit.
Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions.
Gordon Poria says, add a Godzilla to that super chat. That's not how it works, man. If you want us to drink, you actually have to include the emoji, or at least attempt to include it, because, sometimes phone apps are weird like that. You can't just say, retroactively include a drink trigger. Come on.
In my book. If I knew of any.
For which an airtight case could be made. Remember, that's a thing that Kent's probably going to skip over, but that's in the quote.
Yeah.
You got the biggest fossil collection in the world and you don't know of any missing links?
For which an airtight case could be made. Because the thing is, what was specifically asked of him was transitional fossils that are, in fact, ancestral to modern groups. In fact, there's a whole thing where, he was asked about this letter, he couldn't remember the exact letter, but he was taken out of context. And in fact, in the book that was being asked about, there are numerous examples of transitional species called out as such in his book. What Kent is doing here is either just not checking his sources or lying, because this is a quote that flies around creationist circles all the time, right? But in fact, it's just not true. The book is full of examples of transitional forms, and the letter was sent, one, in bad faith, and then two, the response was taken out of context, again, in bad faith.
He said, if I knew of any, fossil or living. Well, that's an interesting confession. If it's living, how can it be a missing link?
Well, because the question was not just about missing links about, previous life forms going to modern life forms, but also about things like, instances of transition today. Mud skippers are transitioning from being aquatic to terrestrial. And they're currently sort of amphibious. They're not amphibians, but they're amphibious. Right? We have things like Wallace's flying frog, which is somewhere on the way towards powered flight, in that it can extend its glide significantly with wing membranes on between its fingers, right? These are transitional between, or these are what we expect of transitions between previous anatomies, like aquatic or, entirely terrestrial, to future anatomies that are at least hypothetically possible, like fully terrestrial mud skippers or powered flying frogs. Now, do we know that mud skippers are going to become fully terrestrial in the future? No. Do we know that Wallace's flying frog will eventually evolve into a flying group of frogs? No. In both cases, it probably won't happen. But they're at least transitioning. They're at least what we would expect of a transition of the middle of that process. Rosina bigger equals more genes Keller for 199 says, if we have a fossil of it, how is it missing? Yeah, there's another thing right there. The term missing link is very stupid. Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra for $5 says, missing links are what happens when you turn your back while cooking sausage within reach of a dog. It's true. Keep your sausages elevated where dogs can't get them. Asta Ordained a Scenery for $199 says, smelling like it's time for that one Futurama meme. It might be, although the thing about that Futurama meme is every time I play it, I get like a nasty gram from YouTube like, hey, you're streaming copyrighted content, you should probably stop. Which is why I hesitate to put it on my live videos. However, I did just, right before we went live, upload a video that does have an extended Dr. Banjo clip in it. And that should be available for early access either later on tonight or early tomorrow morning. And it definitely wasn't the third time I rendered and uploaded that video only to find horrible editing errors. That definitely didn't happen. I definitely didn't spend the entire day trying to get that video done that was already recorded and I thought edited correctly.
Even if it's alive, I would have put it in my book. That's deceitful, okay?
Kent's talking about deceit. I'm just going to take a drink.
He said, if I knew of any fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil. And he goes on to say, for which one can make an airtight or watertight case.
Oh, hey, Kent did say the thing. Hey, Kent, you know why he said that? It's because you can't know for certain whether or not a fossil taxon is directly ancestral to a modern one, short of a fossil record that is almost unprecedentedly good, or ancient DNA, which is hard to get in many cases for these very, very old organisms, or impossible in some cases. Alex Markle says, flying frogs sound like a monster in a D&D campaign. I mean, it could be a cool monster. Or a mount, right? Like you could ride a flying frog into battle. Maybe that could be like the ultimate shock cavalry of the bullywugs. They have flying frogs that they've domesticated, and now they ride them into battle, and they throw their javelins off of the backs of flying frogs. That would be cool. Yeah. Bullywugs are underutilized in D&D. Although, saying that, I do remember that I am more or less boycotting permanently Wizards of the Coast because of all of their horrible, horrible ethical decisions over the past few years now. And here they also got rid of a la carte purchases on D&D Beyond. It used to be that, like, if you wanted a particular magic item or class or something, right, you could buy just that content. You didn't have to buy the entire book it was found in. So, like, you could just buy the Alchemist class from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. You didn't have to buy all of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Not anymore. Nope. You want that stuff for D&D Beyond? You better buy all of it. Yeah, because that's... it's very anti-consumer. And I do not like it. Although it's not nearly as bad as, sending actual Pinkertons to go trespass in some guy's house and threaten him if he doesn't return legally acquired cards.
If evolution had to be proven in a court of law, it would fail in the first round.
Hey, Kent, what's Kitzmiller versus Dover? Just out of curiosity. Oh, right, it was that time that creationism went up against evolution in a courtroom, and evolution won. So let's take a drink for that, because that was stupid. Mr. Anderson says, Deborah, they just changed that, didn't they? About the a la carte purchases? Yes, I believe they did. It was a very recent change. I don't know if they walked it back, though. It seems like the kind of thing they might end up walking back, since it was a leak, and apparently people were pretty pissed off about it. I don't have a D&D Beyond account, so I don't know.
Wouldn't make it to the appellate court or the circuit court or Supreme Court. It would fail in the local court. A freshman law student out of Podunk College could say,
which is a better college than the one Ken went to, let's remember.
Your Honor, he doesn't have any evidence for evolution. It would be so easy to defeat this if evolution had to be proven in a court of law.
False.
Then why is it that it did win in Kitzmiller versus Dover? Why is that, Kent? It's curious. By the way, Mr. Anderson, do make sure that you link your channel, because I do want people to go over there and check out your content about your various debates with creationists.
But it doesn't have to be proven in a court of law. Evolution has to only sound convincing to the students going through high school.
Actually, no. It has to be demonstrated in the scientific literature, which is, if anything, a higher bar than most courts of law, right? Now, we always think about like courts of law in terms of like criminal law, and where it's like, oh, something needs to be demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt. But that's not what most court cases are. Most court cases that actually end up coming to an evidentiary standard and actually having a trial and whatnot, most of them end up on like preponderance of the evidence, right? Which is basically just 50. If you're just slightly more convinced that something happened than that it didn't, then you get to adjudicate that it did happen, right? A much, much lower standard of evidence. That's actually the standard of evidence used in a lot of things, like lawsuits or preponderance of the evidence. Some things are even less, right? Like some things, like whether or not you're going to get a gag order in a trial, or whether or not to issue like not a subpoena, a warrant for like a search and seizure operation or something like that. A lot of that stuff is just clear and convincing, right? Like there's clear evidence of this thing, and it seems reasonably convincing. Might not even rise all the way up to preponderance, and that's fine. So yeah. Whereas in science, right, anyone who can poke any holes in this is going to try, and people did try. People tried for a very long time, and if anything, I would say that getting the level of acceptance in the scientific community that evolution has is a much higher burden than just getting a conviction in a court. And part of the reason that I say that is just because of the number of false convictions that people get. Just check out the Innocence Project. They're full of stories of, just as far as I know, just the United States, where people have been wrongly convicted and then later exonerated based on new evidence. It happens all the time. When was the last time a major scientific theory was overturned? I don't think it's happened in over a century. So, yeah. Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra for $5 says, unlike evolution, Kent does not possess predictive power. True. Yeah. And also, I realize I'm talking about court of law stuff, and there's a trial lawyer in the chat, so hope I got it right.
And that's where the problem comes in, my opinion. Folks, there aren't...
Roasting a bigger equals more genes counter for $4.99 says, Kent is barely familiar with the Snopes monkey trial. You think he knows about Kitzmiller v. Dover? Okay, fair. That's you've got a good point. He probably does not.
Any missing links. No chain is missing. Guys like Stephen Gould, the communist professor at Harvard University.
What does it matter if he's a communist? I don't even know if he was a communist. We can take a drink because Kent's like, well, this guy, he was a communist. So. Also, that in Kent's slides, he has a slide where he quotes Pravda as a reliable source. So, I guess Kent likes communists sometimes, at least, since when
it suits him.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, the time that this Pravda quote is from like the 70s or 80s or something. It's like, it's when it's specifically owned by the Soviet Union, right? Because now it's basically owned by the Russian Federation. But at the time that he's using this quote from, it was a Soviet propaganda piece. And Kent's just like, well, here in Pravda, it says, it's like, okay, sure, Kent. Big old anti-communist there.
Says the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages has been a persistent and nagging problem for evolution.
Nope, it hasn't. And in fact, the book itself contradicts that. DM hasn't changed his username in a while. Wing, who's been a member for 23 months, is at the annual level, says, communism is a red herring! With the Godzillas, we will drink for the Godzilla.
I sent a set of my videotapes to Stephen Gould.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, hold on. Oh, yeah, I'm sure he watched them with avid attention, Kent. Jeez, I sent my video to... Imagine being Stephen J. Gould and getting a bunch of cassette tapes in the mail from Kent Hovind.
Oh, man.
Oh, this has the same energy That's when, like, Roger from Mud Fossil U is like, I email all these professors, but they never get back to me. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, Roger, I can't...
Shocking.
Yeah, I can't imagine why Sabina Hofstetter is not getting right back to you about your idea that maybe dark matter is actually neutrons, and that photons are actually the same thing as electrons, except that electrons also contain a photon and an electron or some craziness. Yeah, like, I can't imagine why particle physicists aren't getting back to you on your whole, like, infinite mass recursive photons. There, Roger. Jeez.
When I went to Harvard, 8 years ago, I guess, I went up there to preach in the area, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I went to visit Harvard after I went to go see Stephen Gould. He wasn't there that day, but I went and met his secretary, very nice lady. My tapes were sitting on his...
I bet he was there. And his secretary was just like,
Exactly.
no, Steve's out. Sorry. Can't, he's sick today. What are the odds?
shelf in his office. I was so proud of myself. Wow, I hope he's watched them. Okay?
I doubt that he has watched them, but maybe.
Steve,
maybe
watch
he
it,
wanted a
okay?
good laugh.
I want to get you converted. You make a great Christian when we get you saved. All right, let's give an analogy to understand. And
By the way, Stephen Jay Gould is now deceased, and as far as I know, he never became a Christian. But then again,
Shucks.
if he had, would I know? Possibly not. But we're also a little bit overdue for a quick break. I'm going to go get myself another fresh, cold beer. And in the meantime, you can listen to the musical stylings of, I don't know, some guy. Do you know who it is, Bent, who did the music for this?
It's me!
What? Oh my goodness. All right, we'll be back after these. I was going to say these messages, but the messages are going to come afterwards. So whatever, we'll be back soon. We are back. Thank you for sticking with me, everybody. I want to say we are actually really close to being on pace for making Bent wear the tutu again.
Nice.
It could be the case. It's not far from guaranteed at this point, but it could be the case.
It can happen.
I want to say, speaking of that, we got first one $4.99 super chat from Rosna Bigger equals more genes Keller, who says, "Reminder: Kent doesn't accept the strong nuclear force as existing. See, the chick tracked Big Daddy for proof. That's true. Yeah, remember he was like, what keeps all these protons together if they're all positively charged? And the answer was like, Jesus. Jesus holds them together. He's sitting there inside of every single atom, just squishing the protons together with Jesus' power. Oh, that's true. I kind of forgot about that. Oh, which is great because we actually read that one on the channel. I think it was you and me and maybe Chesh and Vishanti.
I remember reading that one.
Yeah, it was. Ooh, boy, that was a thing. All right, so before we get right back into this, I do want to say thank you very much for all your support. You guys are extremely generous. It's always amazing to me that I have so much support from so many awesome people. If you are someone who's currently not supporting the channel, but you're interested in doing so, I have a number of ways to help you do that. The first one is Patreon. It's where I get to keep the most of what you're giving me. It is linked in the description. There's also a Patreon for Bent. On my Patreon, you can get early access to videos. Like I said, there should be a video going up either later today or early tomorrow morning. You also get access to a Discord server that's just for supporters. You can get better perks if you give higher than the $1 minimum. You can also get a 15% discount if you go annual. So, if you want those like $20 perks, but you don't want to pay $20 per month, well, you can get a bit over a month free if you just go annual on that. So yeah, Patreon is great. There's also the channel memberships. There's a join button right below this video. If you join, it starts at $1.99. You also get access to the same Discord server. You get the same early access. You get the same higher tier perks if you go to a higher tier. But also you get the green name as well as the cool little symbol. You can see a whole bunch of people in my chat have the cool little symbol, whether it be a top hat or a Ceratosaurus skull, or in some cases a Ceratosaurus, like my actual like Dapper Dinosaur face. A little tetrapod for new members. You get that. There's also, if neither of those are your thing, if you don't want to do an annual or a monthly thing, there's also a merch store. So if you look below this video, there should be a shelf full of like t-shirts and phone cases or whatever. And if none of the things in there interest you, you can always click on any of them and it'll bring you to my store. And from there, you can search my entire store, including for items that I don't have listed on there, because there's a lot of items that I can't put on my merch shelf because I can only have so many on the merch shelf. And also, a lot of them are customizable. So if you see a shirt you don't like, or you do like, but you don't like the color, you get a different color. Most of my stuff has multiple color options. And of course, if none of that is your thing, right? If you're not interested in spending any money, maybe you can't or you just don't want to, please make sure you just hit like and share my videos, and then maybe watch a few of my videos in a row. And if you're not subscribed, of course, do that too. But all right, we're gonna get more Kent in now that I've done with my little ode to capitalism. Oh wait, first we have a $2 super chat from Fade to Gray. Your worldview, our worldview, comrade. Oh yeah, that was a good line from my my talk with that creationist on Jackson Weed's channel. So Fade to Gray says the strong nuclear force is microviolence. Strong nuclear force, take the wheel.
All analogies break down at some point, okay? But tell people...
Hey, that's true. Take a drink.
True.
It's actually why I don't much like analogies for evolution. And it's why I tend to complain about most of them.
Understand a little bit. Let's make an English sentence here.
Okay.
The quick...
You do the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Brown.
Yep. That's what's happening. Come on.
Fox.
Yep. Fox. Jumps.
Jumps.
Over.
The. Lazy.
Yes. Dog. Come on.
Dog.
Yay! Take a drink, everybody.
Do you use that sentence in your English class, Jan?
Not yet.
Not yet. You teach English as a second language.
By the way, the reason this sentence is famous and it comes up is because it contains every letter that is used in the English, or in the alphabet in English, right? So yeah, basically, it's a good way to practice handwriting, typing, that kind of thing.
This sentence contains every letter of the alphabet.
Hey, take a drink.
All 26 letters are found in that one sentence. And now you're going to not listen to a thing I say. You're going to sit there and study the sentence. So it does, trust me, okay? The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I could analyze these. Suppose this was Chinese or, Arabic.
Oh, okay. Weird, but sure, I guess. It's definitely English. I know enough Arabic to know that it's definitely not Arabic. For one thing, I happen to know the word for dog in Arabic, and it's kalb, not dog. So take that, Kent. It's cognate to the Hebrew kalb. Kalb. Whatever. For $5, Gary Bronson says, if your AIG lasts more than 4 hours, seek medical attention. I'll take a drink for that. May you never have that problem, because it is an extremely unpleasant problem.
And I didn't understand anything. To me, it's just a bunch of chalk on a chalkboard, okay? Which is what Arabic looks like to me, a bunch of circles, I don't understand. But they read.
There's very few circles in Arabic. There's loops here and there, but, actual circle, I guess meme is a circle in most contexts. Sometimes it's a circle with a tail. But I guess you could say that, the H letter is kind of circle-ish, but it's got, a line through... whatever. There's not that many circles. Person of bigger equals more Genes Keller says, suppose this super chat was Arabic. I'm so rusty on my Arabic. I should really, really brush up on it. And also Olivia Williams, who's been a member for 24 months, to celebrate 2 years. Congratulations. That's awesome. Let's take a drink for that. There's a Ghidorah in there too. So. Thank you so much. It's always amazing to me how many people have been long-term supporters of this channel. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, I know I've said this before, but if you had told me before I started this channel that I was going to have people who were going to be supporting me for 2 years solid, come on. I hesitated to even make a Patreon at all because I was like, I don't think anyone's going to join this. And then, people were like, no, you have to make a Patreon.
I do recall pressuring you for a while about that.
You did that. Maya Atkinson did that. A bunch of people pressured me.
Yeah.
And hey,
a good thing too.
Yeah. Look, sometimes I need the peer pressure.
Oh yeah, it says right here, or Hebrew. How confusing can you get? Or Russian, but.
None of these languages are more confusing than the other. They're just not the ones you speak, Kent. Or I should say the one, because the only evidence I've ever had that Kent speaks any other language is extremely broken and very bad Spanish.
Suppose I was going to analyze this just as an outsider who knows nothing about English. I would say, some of these letters are rounded. They have kind of round shapes to them. So we're going to classify them as rounded or squared.
That's not normally how letters are classified in English. Usually it's ascenders or descenders and neither. With,
Isn't this
D being an ascender, but okay.
Isn't this topic about lies in the textbooks?
Yes, allegedly.
Yeah, okay, just making sure.
Hey, Rachbot, or Ratchbot, I'm not positive, just joined the channel at the tetrapod level. Thank you very much.
Nice.
Then everybody send tetrapods and sessile tunicates. Don't send pelagic tunicates. They're gross and disgusting.
Could I classify letters of the English alphabet as rounded or squared and group them?
Yes.
The Q would be a rounded one. The O is rounded. The U is rounded. Then the U actually is more complex. It has part rounded, part squared.
If you say so, man. I don't know.
Okay.
So then we're going to have combination. Now the combination letters, the U is a confusing one because the squared part is at the top. The rounded part is at the bottom. Others have the rounded part at the bottom and the squared part at the top, like the P.
Where is he going with this?
I have
no idea what's happening. Yeah, this is...
It says the round part at the top and the square part at the bottom. So we'll have combination 1 and combination 2. I have basically 4 different types of letters in the English alphabet.
Okay.
That's kind of what they've done with the DNA sequencing. I could say, well, look at this sequence. We have, for this sentence, the quick brown fox. We have...
He's going back to his whole, every single one of the nucleotides itself is super complicated and is its own gene. Oh my goodness, I'm taking a drink. Okay. Oh, wow. I can't believe how badly he's doubling down on this.
Well, he doesn't understand, so
Okay.
he doesn't know what else to
In case you haven't been here for a few weeks, Ken thinks that every single nucleotide, like the A, C's, T's, and G's, which he calls A, B's, C's, and D's because he doesn't even know which letters are usually used to represent these things. He thinks that each one is itself a gene, and that the A's are all different and complex and not the same as each other, which is not true. Each one is its own single chemical with its own single chemical formula and its own single geometry. But he thinks that, what's happening is people are ignoring all the complicated chemistry going on inside each nucleotide. Instead, they're just grouping these fantastically complicated and diverse things into 4 broad categories, which is just not what's happening. Kent just fundamentally does not have even a high school understanding of genetics. I learned better genetics than this at my Catholic high school in, my sophomore year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dapper's Pelagic PhD for 100 Argentinian pesos says, when Kent says, pretending I don't know nothing about English, it feels the same as Aladdin saying, pretend I'm an idiot. Oh, this is painful. All right. Fortunately, though, we don't actually have that much more of this one video. We're definitely going to need the next one for next time. Remind me to download the next one, everybody.
Square, 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 round, combination 1, square, round.
Is the I square? It's just one line. Whatever. Maybe he just means unrounded.
It's not round. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Carrie Bronson for $10 US says, I just hit the 3-year membership mark for the record, and I've appreciated every second of it. Thank you so much. You've built a fantastic community with your hard work and brilliant personality. A toast to us. You know what? There was technically no drink trigger there, but I will take a toast to us and the community here, because my goodness, I have one of the greatest audiences on YouTube. You guys
That's
really
true.
are awesome. I mean, for one thing, how many other audiences out there have amazing, meme-based names that they changed for their channel display name, at a drop of a hat? It's hard to find a single one of my streams now at this point where someone doesn't change their name into, some kind of meme based on the specific stream I'm having right now. And it's awesome.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I also like it when they show up in other people's chats. Sometimes they'll show up in, Paul G Alive, and Paul has no clue what's going on with these names.
So I can go through and give these a code, SSSR, C1, SR, C2.
Okay.
Does that mean anything?
No, but it's also
Oh,
it's just not analogous to genetics at all, but okay.
Who cares, okay?
Yeah, good question,
That's what they've done
Kent.
with the protein.
With the protein? No, Kent, there are 20 amino acids in most, of life. There's, 22 if you count some weird bacteria out there. But, 20, which is much closer to just the number of actual letters in the alphabet. You're thinking of the difference between DNA and proteins. And the thing is, Kent doesn't know what a codon is, right? The reason that only 4 nucleotides can code for 20 amino acids and then some other functions like start and stop is specifically because they come in a sequence of 3, right? So it's each nucleotide you can think of as having 2 bits to it, right? But then each codon is encoded in 6 bits. It takes 6 bits to perfectly encode each codon. Now you might say, well, hey, Dapper, that's way more than the 22 functions that you need for a functioning genetic code. And that's true. It's because there's overlaps, right? Most codons have synonymous codons that also do the same thing. Roastnut Bigger equals more gene scout for $4.99 says, Ken acting like he's decoding hieroglyphs based on the number of birds. As someone who has deciphered hieroglyphs as part of getting his degree, that is a weirdly apt thing. And no, you cannot do that. You cannot simply count the birds and determine what a sentence means in ancient Egyptian. Sorry.
Sure.
I know. It would be so much easier if you could. Aha, there are 22 birds in here. Well, therefore I know that this is a curse upon anyone who enters this tomb. Ha ha ha!
The DNA sequence, they have said, oh, this is an A, B, C, D. I should...
Nope. Just take a drink for A, B, C, D. Just remember the movie Gattaca, right? It's got all the letters from A's and C's, and there you go. Why it's called that? Although this was probably given before that movie came out.
Probably. Well, maybe.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Let's hit the play button.
I should look up the 4 letters.
Yeah.
Can you claim to be an expert in this, and you claim to have taught science for 15 years? You shouldn't need to look it up, honestly. The fact that Kent doesn't know A, C, T, and G off the top of his head is mind-boggling. Like, Ben, you're not a geneticist?
No.
Do you have any degrees in genetics at all?
I mean, I got an A in. Does that count
No.
as a degree?
No. Yeah. And yet, I'm not a geneticist. You know how many specifically genetics classes I've taken in my entire life?
Mm-mm.
0. Not a 1.
I've taken 1.
Yeah.
And I got it. Yeah.
If you're going to present yourself as not just an expert, but the guy who's going to overturn essentially all of science with his brilliant big brain arguments about the flood of Noah, you should probably know at least the abbreviations for all 4 nucleotides. Right? I don't care that much that you don't know the full name of them. Not many people use those all the time, but like at least know that it's not A, B, C, and D. It's A, C, T, G. Right? Like, or I guess you can also sometimes go with T if you're talking about RNA, but whatever. We're talking about DNA.
With you.
Oh yeah, so it's T with you, yeah. Thank you for helping me there.
Mm-hmm.
Sentence got a little bit away from me.
That's okay.
The different components of the DNA. Somebody will blast me for this, I'm sure. But
Yep, that's true. Someone will. Hi, Kent. Right here. Years later.
I taught this years ago. I just forgot at the moment. Who cares?
Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra says for $2, AIG is a bag of nucleotide Dixonine. That mysterious D that gets in there when Kent is talking about genetics. We'll take a drink for that. And then Rosina Bigger equals more Genes Color for $4.99 says, I think Kent actually knows ACTG today. James Tour doesn't know what A stands for, however. Ooh. Well, I mean, to be fair to James Tour, he rarely talks about genetics per se. So I don't want to say that's okay, but like, at least he usually tries to stay in something that he kind of pretends is his lane. Whereas Kent is just always all over the place. I have more respect for James Tour than Kent Hovind. Which is not to say that I have a whole lot of respect for James. You know. Alright, I think we have slipped behind 2-2 pace, so I think you are safe. Because we still need like 146,
we'll see.
And I don't think we're going to get
Oh.
Okay? And I could compare this sentence to another sentence and probably find another sentence with a very similar sequence of letters.
Yeah, probably.
You could just write a similar sentence.
Right?
So, sure.
This might be the worst analogy for genetics that I've ever heard in my entire life. Jillian circled Arabic friend. Says, what exactly is Kent's lane? That was a great question. How to beat your kid.
So, doesn't mean a thing. And the fact that there are some similarities of the proteins and similarities of sequences, it doesn't mean a thing. It has nothing to do with evolution. I've done...
You know what, Kent? I will agree. Your completely nonsensical analogy that bears no resemblance to genetics as it is understood by even other young Earth creationist geneticists does in fact have nothing to do with evolution. So I'll take a drink. Good job, Kent.
I'm out of Baja Blast.
Wait, you already drank your 2 bottles of Baja Blast?
It's just 1 bottle.
I thought you had 2.
I mean, I'm not drinking 2 bottles of Baja Blast.
Oh, come on.
That's too much caffeine.
Nah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's more caffeine than I would drink.
Well, when you put it that way.
And Roasted Up Bigger equals more Gene Stellar for $9.99 says, wrong, sir. Gluons are a made-up dream. No one has ever measured them. No one has ever seen or even measured them. They don't exist. It's a desperate theory to explain away truth from Big Daddy. It's so true. It is a quote directly out of Big Daddy. Oh, one of the
Gluons are a made-up dream.
Oh, man. I love that chick track so much. We'll take a drink. Which actually also means it is time to open up the third beer.
Nice.
Or as the Klingons say, which is just third. Or allows third booze, right? Because there isn't a specific word for beer. Anything with alcohol is just a kind of which is why I usually say that word translates to booze, which is just the most generic word in English for alcoholic beverage that I can think of. You know, that isn't like polysyllabic. Yeah, there we go. Sometimes I call beer specifically tier in Klingon, because tier means like grain. That beer is fermented grains. As opposed to like eothek, which would be like blood wine, or like irepnach, would be like wine, grape. Anyway,
55 debates at this time against evolutionists. Okay, I'm willing to do any more, anytime.
it's true. He is. Kent is very willing to debate, which is weird to me because he almost always comes across as a complete moron. Like if you,
and he doesn't even realize it.
No, that's the thing is he doesn't. If you have the level of intelligence of like mayonnaise that's been left out in the sun for a week or so, or more, like the minimum intelligence, you can probably run circles around Kent Hovind. And just as long as you're, you know, get your notes about what your talking points are, and you don't let him weasel out of actually answering your questions. Yeah, chances are you can absolutely dunk on Kent in a debate with very little effort.
I did one in Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, 4 months ago, I guess. There was 2 professors against me, 2-on-1. I just read on the internet last week, one of the professors wrote about his experience debating a creationist, you know. What was it like? Did you read that, Eric? Yeah, we watched the videotape. Didn't turn out very well. The audio was lousy. I wish we could use that because it was really a good debate.
That does suck. As someone who has had audio turn out badly, yeah. I remember one time there was a Windows update and it reset what microphone my recording software was set to, and switched from like my real microphone that I'm using right now to like my Oculus Rift headset microphone. And I recorded like an hour and 10 minutes or something of raw audio. And when I went back to go edit through it, I'm like, oh, I have to redo this entire thing.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was. Whew, that was a rough day. That just ruined the entire day for me because I was like, well, yeah, I was gonna say things I try not to say on stream because it's PG-13.
But he was whining on the internet, on his website, about how that it's unfair to debate creationists.
I mean, it is kind of like going into like a caged match in like an MMA arena against like a 4-year-old, right? It is kind of unfair. It's like, what do you?
A little bit.
What do you do? And it's like, at least they're actually adults. So like, even if it is sort of the same energy as going into the octagon with a 4-year-old. It's not actually doing that. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, it is unfair. But also, there's also the BS asymmetry principle. You know what? Look, PG-13, we can say bullshit once at least. I know, right? But the bullshit asymmetry principle, which is just the principle that it takes less time to spout a bunch of nonsense than it does to show why it's nonsense and then correct the information. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like, if I say absolute craziness, like, the moon is actually made out of coconut jello, and the stars are actually holes in the firmament that let through the light of the elemental plane of fire that exists beyond the dome of the heavens, and also DNA nucleotides are each gene. Okay, to counter all of that is going to take a whole lot longer than it took for me to make those claims, right? Because you're going to have to go into, like, what is a star? Do we have a domed firmament? What are the problems with the moon being made out of coconut jello? All of these things. It's going to be a lot, right? And it's going to take a lot longer. So it's unfair in two ways. On the one hand, I mean, creationists are just intellectual buffoons for the most part. So on the one hand, it's extremely easy to show that anything that they're saying is just not true. On the other hand, it also takes time, so it's sort of doubly unfair. But maybe that evens out, right? I don't know. Kerry Bronson for $2 says, "Battle of wits with an unarmed man," and all that. Yes, exactly. Here we go.
Because, they're professional debaters.
I would not actually characterize it that way, but okay.
I've never had a debate class in my life. Okay, all I know is I'm right, he's wrong.
Kent, it doesn't matter if you have had a debate class. That's not what it takes to be a professional. You get money on the back of your debates. Even if you're not directly paid to go to do the debate, you sell the videotapes. You are a professional debater. You've made it your business to debate for money. Granted, in many cases, the money comes in indirectly, but that's still what it is, right? It's like when I go onto some bigger channel for free. Yet part of the reason I do that is in hopes that I can spread awareness that I exist and people can come over and maybe, subscribe to my channel and then eventually maybe even become patrons or channel members and what, right? Yeah, it's a professional thing. Do I get directly paid to say, I don't know, go dunk on Gunter Beckley over on Aaron Ross' channel? No, not directly. But I still did it. I still saw a bump in subscribers, bump in views, which means I ultimately did get money for it. It's not, directly in payment for that particular appearance. Shanti says for $2, but they are master debate. Gets shot. Yeah.
Very easy to win a debate when you're confident like that. So I emailed him back 3 days ago. I haven't checked my email today yet to find out if I got an answer. I said, because he said in his long diatribe about why you shouldn't debate creationists, he says nobody can possibly be trained in all of the different areas they will bring up. You'd have to be a geologist and a biologist and et cetera, et cetera.
Which is actually why I say that debates with creationists should have a very specific focus, right? Debating creation evolution is nonsense, right? That's way too much. There's so much that's going to come up. That's why when I debate, I have particular debate theses, right? Like one of the ones I've done several times is, are birds dinosaurs? Because for some reason, young Earth creationists have decided to die on the hill that no, they're not. And I can show...
For no good reason.
Yeah, for no good reason, right? It's just as silly as if they decided that, no, whales aren't mammals. They're just fish that breathe air. We're just going to go with it. Like, oh, weird hill to die on, but at least you're dead. And so that is one of the things that I would say is, if you're ever going to debate a creationist, do not accept as broad a debate topic as just evolution versus creation. Make it specific, right? Do something like, do evaporite deposits show that Noah's flood could not be the cause for the geological column as a whole, or for say the Mesozoic or something, right? So you only talk about Mesozoic evaporite deposits, or do what I did with are birds dinosaurs, or do what the late Bill Ludlow did, where it's is there evidence for human evolution from non-humans? Something very specific like that. Roasting up bigger equals more genes. Keller for $1.99 says, Kent admitting that young Earth creationists deny every single science. Yeah, basically. That is more or less what's happening.
So I said, I hereby challenge your entire science department. I will debate all the teachers in your entire university at the same time. On the condition...
Yeah, because they're all going to be free and willing at the same time. They all have exactly the same attitudes about all of this, and they're all going to be free. Don't worry about it.
It's equal time for each position, not each person. If there's 20 of you and 1 of me, I want half of the time. That's fair?
Here's the thing, right? There's a reason that actual scientific debate goes on in the literature. It's because there's no need to do a time limit, right? You can take as much space as you need to actually go through and cite sources and go through your opponent's sources and everything in the literature, right? So there is a sense in which actual spectacle debates like Kent is talking about they're not really how science gets done. And I do think there is some value to them in that if you're careful about it, you can show up your opponent in front of the audience. Because remember, when it comes to a debate, you're never actually trying to convince your opponent. Because that's not the point. Your opponent isn't going to change their mind because you had a good debate before. If that were the case, Kent Hovind wouldn't be a creationist and wouldn't have been for many, many years, because I've seen many of his classic debates. He sounds just as stupid as he does here, right? But your goal is to make the audience at least think, right? Most people are going to come in and leave with the same conclusion. But at least some of them will be exposed to some new ideas. And it might push them in some direction or another. Remember, hey, I mean, I've told the story a whole bunch. I'm not going to go into in details, but a mock debate about creation versus evolution at my church is what got me started looking into evolution in the first place. It's what got that ball rolling that led me to realizing that, yeah, young earth creationism is nonsense. I should probably stop believing that. Because I'm a former young earth creationist, as are a lot of the people who appear on my channel.
Me?
Yep.
I am.
Guts Gibbon, also a former young earth creationist. Right?
For me, it was within the last 5 years or so that I stopped being in YEC. So most of my life, I've been in YEC.
Mm-hmm. It was significantly earlier for me, but... And yeah, I know. How is it I'm a young earth creationist when I was around 150 million years ago in the Jurassic period? Don't worry too much about that.
That way, if we get into a topic that deals with biology, have your biology teacher answer it. When I debated Pigliucci at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, he is a botany professor.
Wait, isn't that where my dad went to school?
Don't know.
I think it is. I should double check with him later.
Assistant professor, associate professor. His PhD is in botany, the study of plants.
So I'm sure you debated botany, right, Kent? You didn't go off into geology and astronomy and all these things? Because you were talking to a botanist? So maybe you had a topic about... Oh, no, of course not.
I said, Mr. Pigliucci, what is your best evidence for evolution? What's the best evidence you know of? He said, the fossil record.
You know what? Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra has a good idea. This might be a good spot for a poll on how much of the chat is former young earth creationists. You know what? I like that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. No, I really like that. Okay, so we're going to start a poll. Are you a former creationist? And what I'm going to have is we're going to have yes, YEC. We're going to have a yes, OEC for old earth creationist. And, I forgot to add a no. So we're going to end that poll real quick, and then I'm going to add a real poll. Goodness. That's Dapper's a professional right there. I forgot to mention that, but that's a drink trigger right there. Is Dapper's a professional. So, Ben, I'm going to clickety-clack. Why don't you talk more about Encounter at Farpoint?
Yeah, so like many television programs, this episode was filmed in color and not like a grayscale or a black and white, which is pretty nice. It's nice seeing things in color.
It is pretty nice, yeah. I also appreciate that the special effects were done on film so that they could then later be just directly re-edited at high definition for the DVD. That was pretty cool. All right, Vantelli in 1998 for $2 says, how did young earth creationists work in the Jurassic? Like I said, don't worry about it, man. Just don't worry about that. No questions.
Now hold it. You're teaching botany. Mm-hmm. Why do you think the best evidence is over in some other department, paleontology?
I don't even know how to answer that question. Right?
I don't know how much evolution botanists deal with.
It's like
a lot, a little. I don't know.
It kind of feels like you're talking to I don't know. You're like your electrical theory professor. And you're like, okay, so what do you think is the best evidence for the standard model of particle physics? He's like, I don't know. Why don't you go check with Professor so and so who teaches the theoretical physics course? You're a professor of electrical theory. How come you don't have the best evidence for the... Dude, because it might not be in that field. I would actually argue that genetics is the best evidence for evolution, and I would say that at least the geneticists that I know, which is more than one, would tend to agree with me, as well as actually a number of the people I know who aren't geneticists would tend to agree with me that genetics has the best evidence for evolution. But like, it's not a dig against the theory that a person working in one part of the field of science in which the theory forms the framework thinks that the best evidence for the theory itself lies elsewhere. That's just a thing that is true that person thinks. It's not a point against evolution. It doesn't mean anything. Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain, who's been a member for 12 months, says Dapper waited around between Chicxulub Impact event until October 22nd, 404 BC for the world to begin. Yes, I did. With the Godzilla. Drink for that. Thank you very much. All right, here we go.
I said, the fossil record of what? He said, the fossil record for the evolution of whales is the best evidence we have.
I mean, it's pretty good. I'm not sure that's what I would pick as the best. I think the human series is actually significantly better. But, I mean, the whale evolution series is pretty darn good.
Now think about it. Here's a PhD in botany thinking the evidence for evolution is over in anthropology department.
Nope, Kent, that's not what you asked, according to you yourself. I'm going to take a drink for that. You just lied, Kent. You said you asked a botanist, what's the best evidence for evolution? And the thing he said wasn't botany. That is not the same thing as him saying that there's no evidence from botany. Further, I don't know if Kent knows this, but plant fossils are a thing. So even if he says the fossil record, that includes plant fossils. I don't know. Hey, everyone in chat, we already have one poll going that I don't want to end yet. But just put in a 1 if you've heard of plant fossils and you're aware that there are fossil plants. Put a 2 in the chat if you've never heard of the idea of fossil plants. Yeah, just let me know there. I really hate this bait and switch because it's just so blatant, right?
Yeah.
I asked the professor where the best evidence for evolution was, and he didn't even say anything that had to do with his field of study. So I guess his field of study doesn't have any evidence at all. Yeah, that's not how that works, Kent, and I strongly suspect that you're aware of that. And also, ones are just pouring in, because of course people have heard of plant fossils. They're not that unusual.
But if you go to the anthropologists and say, where's the evidence for evolution? They'll say, oh, they've got it in the biology department.
I mean, first of all, anthropology, do you mean like paleoanthropologists, Kent? Because it's weird that you would ask anthropologists that, but okay. But also, in some schools, paleontology is part of the biology department, right? It varies from school to school, right? Sometimes paleontology classes fall under geology, sometimes it's under biology. But, that isn't a different answer necessarily. Gapper's Pelagic PhD for 100 Argentinian pesos says, did Kent say whale evo is anthropology? No, I don't believe that was his implication. I mean, he's pretty dumb, but I don't believe that's what he intended to mean.
Ask the biologist, where's the evidence? Oh, the anthropologists have it. Or the geologists have it. Everybody thinks somebody else has the evidence.
They do all have the evidence, though.
Well, yeah, there's that too. And part of it is the academics have a tendency to be understated, right? They are cautious because making statements that you can't back up with evidence is like the kiss of death for an academic career. And so a lot of times people who think that they have really good evidence for X will still hedge their bet and say, well, I think this evidence over here is even better than mine. Just because you're hedging your bet. There's also that.
It's a shell game. You ever see those things at the carnival where they get 3 shells and they tell you to put a pea under there, and the guy tries to get you confused, switching them around? Evolution is a shell game. Each person thinks the pea is under a different one.
Except, Kent, when you're specifically talking about, quote, the best evidence, what's actually happening is that you have peas under every single shell. And you're asking, hey, which shell has the most peas? And then because not everyone agrees with each other, you're concluding that there just aren't any peas under any of the shells at all. Which doesn't follow. That's not how that works. Further, even at a regular shell game, if everyone disagrees where the P is, it doesn't actually mean it's not under any of the shells. Now, granted, actual real-world shell games like this are almost always scams where they use sleight of hand to push the P off the table so you never guess it. But we're assuming an honest shell game here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Heather, cursorial angiosperms coon for $2 says, What does he think coral and amber are? What do you mean, what does he think coral and amber are? I have no idea. I mean, I don't even know if he knows that coral are animals. Yeah, I don't know. My Unfinished Journey for $10 says, that's a trope I remember from my old Earth creationist days. Oh, nice. Then Dutch Tunicate Official for $2 says, as a kid, I found a fossilized leaf imprint. Oh, that's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm just going to end the poll now, and we're going to take a look at the results, which I think are pretty interesting. So we had 67 votes. Now, of those 67 respondents, 55% of them were never creationists. But that means 44%, well, I mean, you add them up. It's 67, so it doesn't go into, whole number percentage. But about 44% were creationists, split evenly between 22% young Earth creationists and 22% old Earth creationists. Oh, coal.coral? It does say coal. I put an R in there for no reason. Dapper's a professional. Here's a drink. Because more beer is definitely going to help me read better. No, I don't think you know. Well, okay, so he might actually know that coal is primarily derived from compressed plant matter, and just think that it happened during the flood, which is the typical young Earth creationist theory. Not theory, like claim about coal. But I don't actually know. I don't think I've heard him talk a whole lot about coal. Yeah, I don't know. I know he said things like oil can be made in a laboratory very quickly under, laboratory conditions, which, okay, that's true, but, the real world isn't a laboratory. So yeah, I'm not sure if he does know what those are. All right, here we go.
There is no P under any of them.
Sorry, that just struck me as funny.
False.
Nobody has the evidence.
They all do.
Nobody has.
Mm-hmm, yep. And he's not even asking, do you have evidence for evolution? That's the thing. It's this whole line of reasoning is fundamentally dishonest. It's just equivocation. Not even equivocation. It's just a bait and switch.
Has ever found any evidence for evolution. That's why about 10 years ago in our ministry we said, look, started off, I guess 12 years ago, I wrote a letter to the editor in the local paper here, and I said, I will pay $1,000 for any evidence for evolution.
Oh, it's crashing.
A lawyer friend of mine a couple of months later said, hey, Mr. Oven, let's make it $10,000. I'll back you up. I said, $10,000? He said, yeah, that's nothing for me. I got plenty. I said, okay.
That's fun. So here's the thing about Kent Hovind's money challenge while I bring this thing back up, right? Kent did have a money challenge for anyone who could show evidence for evolution, which you would think would be a pretty easy thing to do, right? Just find evidence for evolution, which is all over the place, and then you provide it to him. So, you could put transitional fossils, or ERVs, or, any of a number of different things like that, right? But the problem is that that's not actually what the challenge was. The challenge was poorly named, shall we say. And what was actually happening... Oh! Take a drink for Godzilla! What was actually happening is that his challenge was to provide evidence that God could not have done it. Of course, what's the problem with providing evidence that an omnipotent being couldn't have done something?
That seems impossible.
Exactly.
Fundamentally impossible.
And who do you think was the ultimate arbiter of whether or not someone had met the conditions for
a fair
his
and
challenge?
impartial third party. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
No.
You might think that. But it was actually... Oh, take a drink for Kent Hovind again.
I can see a use for that. But a chihuahua...
Yeah, sorry, there's Kent back again. Yeah, you might think that. But in fact, it was just Kent. Just Kent.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Back to the shell game area. Give me a second. Let me turn Bent off for a second so I can share my screen with him. They'll still be audible.
I'll see you guys next time. I'll miss you. Most of you.
Still seeing them. In fact, you should be seeing
Hey,
them.
Kent's back.
Those bent. All right. Now that we have
Yay.
Kent and bent, we can continue on.
P under any of them. Nobody has the evidence. Nobody has ever found any evidence for evolution. That's why about 10 years ago in our ministry we said, look, started off, I guess 12 years ago, I wrote a letter to the editor in the local paper here, and I said, I will pay $1,000 for any evidence for evolution. A lawyer friend of mine a couple of months later said, hey, Mr. Oven, let's make it $10,000. I'll back you up. I said, $10,000? He said, yeah, that's nothing for me. I got plenty. I said, okay. So we made the offer $10,000. Then a friend of mine from Oregon called me and said, hey, Bro Hovind, let's make it $250,000. I'll back you up. I'll keep the money in a special account. $250,000. I can't imagine having $250,000 just to sit around in an account.
I'm actually not aware that there was ever like an escrow account backing up Kent Hovind's quote-unquote challenge, but Roasting a bigger equals more jeans color says for $1.99, the quick brown chihuahua jump scare.
Out someplace. He said, I'll back you up. So we put all kinds of publishing out there. We'll put $250,000 for evidence for evolution. He called me about a year later and said, hey, let's make it $1 million. I said, let's keep it at $250,000. Okay, I've got so much stuff printed that says $250,000. I don't want to go back and reprint everything. You could offer any amount of evidence, any amount of money for the there is no evidence.
Oh, that sounded like a Freudian slip right there. You could offer any amount of evidence, and Kent won't care because he didn't prove that an omnipotent creator couldn't have done it. Oh man, I'll take a drink for that.
Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog.
Which would be a problem for evolution if someone did have it. Because that's fundamentally a violation of what evolutionary theory says should happen. Now, granted, it wouldn't be great for young Earth creationism, but it would also be really bad for evolution.
Let alone a dog come from a banana.
Nobody thinks dogs came from bananas.
Correct. And does evolution propose that the common ancestor of bananas and dogs was either a banana or a dog?
I don't think so.
No, it does not. No, it would have basically just been like the first eukaryote or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which would have been a single-celled organism that it was neither a banana nor a dog.
Nor a dog. Single-celled dog.
Well, I mean, there is that single-celled dog that exists as a parasitic cancer.
And that's true.
So, all right, here we go. Get a little bit more in, then we're going to wrap up. Actually, you know what? It's already really late. We're just going to wrap up here. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to make sure that I try to remember to download Class 2 of CSE 103. If you are interested, I believe Bent confirmed, but we are planning to watch a few, 4 episodes of Power Rangers SPD over on the Discord server for supporters.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go do that, please feel free. I mean, look, we just watched a few episodes. We actually even have plans for when we're done with Power Rangers, because we're getting close. We're actually well past the halfway point. Roasting a bigger equals more jeans Keller says, bananas are ovaries anyways. Well, I mean, they develop from something that's analogous to ovaries. So, I mean, not wrong. Anyway, so, do you have anything that you want to tell people about that's coming up?
Tomorrow night, Power Rangers Jungle Beast on Top Hats Off.
Yes, that is the
I
plan.
will be there, Dapper will be there, a few other people will be there, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yep.
So come by and watch.
Yeah, it is our actual play of the Power Rangers TTRPG. It is a whole lot of fun. At least I have a lot of fun with it. I don't know. And yeah, in case you guys didn't know, I have a second channel, Top Hats Off. Oh my goodness. Have a drink for Godzilla. Oh my goodness, do it again. Jeez. Oh, it's not even who usually texts me this time of night. It's someone else. All right, so up on this channel, coming up on Thursday, we have the Creepy Carl, the movie. So that is like 3+ hours of me just demolishing Carl Baugh while using spookiness to help do it, because, you know, it was produced in October. Then on Saturday, the plan is for more of the, what's his name? Dr. Thomas Kindle, I'm not really sure. The guy with a voice that means that he really should have just been a radio announcer instead of whatever nonsense he's doing now.
Does have a very soothing voice.
Really does. Look, credit where it's due. Great voice guy. You won the lottery when it came to voice. And then on a Tuesday, the plan is Matt with Maddie, where we will be continuing on with that nutrition podcast that has yet to talk about nutrition at any point. Yeah, that's what's coming up. Then, of course, next Thursday, we also have, I'm going to be mirroring a live stream that I did on Dr. Kip Davis's channel back when my channel was hit with that false community guidelines strike that YouTube decided to uphold after manual review, and they didn't drop until basically people started harassing them. I did appreciate all the support there. You guys really came through. I had a quick GoFundMe to help, you know, cover anything. And my goodness, you guys really, really turned that month around, because it's a really big deal if I can't stream or upload video. It's a really big hit. And I'm only just now recovering in the algorithm from that, because you lose momentum and that's it. So I want to say thank you to everyone who helped make that not be a complete disaster. But anyway, I hope everyone stays safe out there. I hope to see all of you on Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, or just, you know, in the Discord server. We're going to watch some Power Rangers. With that, I'm going to get out of here. Ben, if you have any last words, say them now or forever hold your peace.
Okay.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Thoravara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Eleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Wallace, John Ackerman, Ita V, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.